week 4 of IPB Monash University. My name is Damayanti Bukhari from IPB University, and I will be your moderator for today's webinar. The theme of this series is sustainable urban planning and design for new cities. And today we are very happy to have two outstanding speakers, one from IPB University and also from Monash University. And let me introduce each of them and also read their biography before we move on to the presentation. So first, I would like to introduce Professor Hadi Susilo Arifin, PhD, from IPB University. He's a professor in ecology and management of landscape. He received his PhD degree from the Graduate School of Natural Sciences and Technology from Okayama University, Japan. And his master's from IPB, the Natural Resource and Environmental Sciences. His present occupation right now, head of the Landscape Management Laboratory, Department of Landscape Architecture, Faculty of Agriculture, IPB University. And he's also a chief of the master degree study program at the Natural Resource and Environmental Management Science from the School of Graduate Studies at IPB University. He has lectured in various places in addition to IPB University, and he has also become a visiting professor in many universities, among them from the IDEC Hiroshima University in Japan, and also a visiting professor at Michigan State University during 2010-2011, and also a visiting professor at the Awaji Landscape Planning and Horticulture Academy at Hyogo, Japan. So he seems to have a very close relationship with the Japanese here, Japanese culture. His research, many research, among them are research and pekarangan for support food security and food sovereignty at the family scale, and also research on resilient cities, communities, and water-sensitive cities in urban water cluster. This is a joint collaboration between IPB, ITS, University of Indonesia, and also Monash University. He has research on the enabling environment for low carbon policies in Bogor City, and Future Cities Laboratory, Landscape Ecology at the Ciliwung River. And this is in collaboration with ETH, Zurich, and also National University of Singapore in Singapore. So that is the first biography, and allow me to read Professor Diego also, so later on I don't have to do a lot of cutoff for the discussion. Let me introduce a warm welcome to Professor Diego Ramirez Lovering. Welcome, Professor Diego. It's nice to have you here. Professor Diego is an architecture. He is a professor at the architecture at the Faculty of Art, Design, and Architecture at Monash University. His research examines the contributory role that design and design thinking can play in addressing the significant challenges facing contemporary urban environment, climate change, resource limitations, and rapid population growth, with a key focus on the global south and through a lens of planetary health. Professor Diego is also the director of the Informal Cities Lab, or ICL. This lab undertakes design-based research, exploring and speculating on the conditions of informality in developing cities, with specific focus on the Indo-Pacific. ICL research design and conducted in collaboration with government and industry, strives for impact, purposefully and strategically targeting implementation at the intersection of academic research and international development. As an award-winning architectural urban design practitioner and researcher, He has completed a range of projects to advance planetary health and social equity and resilience objectives, including affordable housing, water-sensitive precinct designs, and informal settlement revitalization projects with state, local, and international governments and industry. Wow, really a complex research and a transdisciplinary research that Professor Diego has been undergoing in the past, I don't know how many years of work. So congratulations for Professor Diego and Professor Hadi Suselo. Today we are going to learn more about your work and very enthusiastic about learning from you for today. So the first opportunity I would like to give to Professor Hadi Susilo Arifin for a 25-minute presentation. And if you agree, I would like to have a 3-minute before the end of the talk. I would like to give a sort of like a 3-minute warning. Is that okay?
Okay.
So you will have time. Okay. So 3-minute warning before the 25 minutes. Professor Hadi.
Okay.
Please, the time is yours.
Thank you, Professor Damayanti. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon in Indonesia time. So the topic my lecture is sustainable urban landscape development. So I would like to share you my presentation. Oh no. Well, as an introduction, so this is the big challenges in Indonesian cities. As we know, there are urbanization effects such as congestion, sanitation, pollution, and low productivity. And the second one is climate change impacts to flooding in the rain season, and there is drought in the dry seasons. And also we have a problem in urban heat island and also a health problem. Indonesia faces unique challenges, uh, having a projected 300 million people dispersed across thousands of islands. And this complicates energy supply and infrastructure. Further exacerbated by a particular vulnerability to natural disaster. And the rapid growth of its cities, especially medium-sized cities, sees projections of 75% of the population concentrated in urban area by 2030. And cities already produce up to 60% of Indonesia GDP. So city planning is very, very crucial. Better city design can foster good habits such as using public transport. This relies on successfully implementing sustainable action and require a greater collaboration between public and private sector, with the latter driving development, especially in creating green and smart city. Therefore, the future city in Indonesia must have resilience in these challenges. New city, mostly satellite cities development in the future, especially beyond pandemic COVID-19, should consider to the first is cities that have health protocol. It means the health and safety. So now the pandemic COVID-19 is a wake up call for us. And the safety first from the cradle. Everybody always say safety first. And now absolutely trust. And every city until the nation policy should be have a system operational procedure of health and safety. And of course, national health system reform. And the second one, social protection system, is adopted from various social protection concepts, namely collection of public effort to deal with vulnerability and poverty, and cannot work alone. So it needs to be complemented by other strategies such as empowerment and job creation. And the third one, economic recovery through revitalization of manufacturing industry. So this is include all food, chemical, textile, machine, and equipment. Sustainable development is very important topic in environmental and landscape design, planning, management for the international environmental movement. And based on the sustainability history, we know early decade of the 70s, awareness that in the development process of countries in the world, acceleration of the achievement of world economic growth is closely related to the availability of natural resources. And sustainable development had declared in World Conservation Strategy by IUCN in 1980. And this concept was coined at the Earth Summit Rio de Janeiro, Brasilia in 1992. And the main purpose of sustainability development is improving the standard of living of society to achieve prosperity. And the second one, we have to think about the multi-dimensional studies. For example, biophysical, philosophy, communication, legal, economic, political, social, and spiritual. Therefore, right here, we may classify three pillars of system development, that is cultural aspect in the top, ecological aspect, and economical aspect. And from sustainable city to eco-city, there are some activities indicator. For example, when we compare to the SDGs, then we know the goal 11 is how the importance of sustainable cities and communities. And the indicator of eco-city, the first, as an urban ecosystem which is ecologically sound. It means minimizing the negative impact of development of the environment. Two, reduction of ecological footprint, waste management, and its utilization. And number three, achieving environmental sustainability through reduce greenhouse gas emission, utilization of renewable energy, and green transportation. And the fourth is creation of vibrant economies, environment-friendly production, and industry that supports high capital gross domestic product level. The fifth, maintaining high air and water quality standard. And the sixth, rainwater harvesting system, less usage of fossil fuels. And the last indicator is protection of ecologically sensitive habitats, physical and non-physical culture legacies, and promotion of green lifestyle and regional integration. So this slide, the question is, what is an eco-city? Yeah, eco-city is a city built of the principle of living within the means of the environment. The ultimate goal of many eco-cities is to eliminate all carbon waste, to produce energy entirely through renewable sources, and to incorporate the environment into the city. However, eco-city also have the intention of stimulating economic growth, reducing poverty, organizing city to have higher population density, and therefore higher efficiency in improving health. So this is very important. And the holistic concept of the eco-city has a balanced relationship between the urban and the rural in order to support the sustainable development goals. Urban landscape forming elements consist of human, plant, animal as a biotic element, and also soil, land use, geology, air, water, topography, and climate as a biotic element. And the urban landscape is affected by forms such as hill, valleys, beaches, lakes, sea, and topography. And also features, for example, rain, fog, temperature, relative humidity, and groundwater. And the third one, influenced or affected by forces, for instance, wind, sea, airflow, the group process, lightning, erosion, and solar radiation. Urban landscape is supported by urban design, economic aspect, regional plan, technology and environmental sciences, civil engineering, agriculture, forestry, building architecture, and finally, socio-cultural aspect. So city boundaries are made by administrative boundary, but also has ecological boundary. If the city locate in the one unit of watershed from the upper stream, middle stream to the downstream, or also has cultural boundary. Especially in Indonesia, we have many ethnic city. So some city we call it Kota Jawa or Kota Batak, Kota Madura, depend on the predominantly of the community where they come from. And here, if we compare between biocapacity in the left side and ecological footprint in the right side. So we know biocapacity of the globe is 1.8 hectare per person. This is come from bioproductivity times the area globe. In the other side, ecological footprint is 2.2 hectare per person. Then we know there is overshoot 0.4 hectare per person, and the impact is environmental degradation because over carrying capacity. Carrying capacity itself is one tool which manage the city could be a system, and carrying capacity function is area, resources, population, and time. So in the left of human population, the carrying capacity is area, the number of people that can be supported by the region based on the resources it has and how the availability resources are used sustainably. And in the right side, there is illustration of the strategy of the common. This is a situation in shared resources system where individual users to the common good of all by depleting or spoiling the shared resources through their collective action. So this is many problem in our city, like as the common tragedy. And the third part of my lecture is protection and conservation of urban greenery and blue open space. So this is the lesson and case study from Sentul City, our study site when we have collaboration research with Monash University in water sensitive city research. Sentul City has located in Kabupaten Bogor or Bogor district, and has the total area developed 3,100 hectare, and the population density is 3.5% per hectare. The city is still developing, and then the population is increasing time by time. And greenfield development for upscale residential, commercial, and recreation project. And on the data of 2018, the population is 11 living in Sentul city. And there is green infrastructure project implemented, such as a feed drain, vertical garden, and green roof garden. By this slide, I would like to show you the Sentul city issues and objective. The first issue is stormwater runoff causing, and objective one, how reduce impact stormwater runoff. And the second issue is well water scarcity due to soil properties and over extraction. So objective two, improve water self-sufficiency with rainwater harvesting. And the third issue is pollution of river and water bodies. So the objective number three, upscale existing green infrastructure initiative. And the last issue is integration of river and water bodies with the context. And the last objective is include water sensitive urban design in the development of urban spaces and residential and commercial project. Talking the green infrastructure as the report main finding, Sentul City already incorporates a number of green or environmentally sustainable system, and system have been implemented for reasons such as aesthetic, but have the potential to be adapted, also provide water treatment and retention purposes. The initiative in Sentul City include a garden, vegetated drains, and artificial creek lining the 60.2 kilometer in the main road. So the main road is Siliwangi Avenue. So this is the longest road in Sentul City. And we have 6 urban design recommendation. Sentul City has several planned development to become more sensitive. So it is recommended for Sentul City to integrate green technology, develop urban design guidelines for developers. So this is including water sensitive urban design, and include the use of green technology based on hydrology and water balance model to offer a better performance of the GT infrastructure, green technology infrastructure, and also build rainwater tank in residential and commercial area, water sources other the PDAM such as rainwater, and develop multifunctional public open space. And we promote local species, then introduce species for the greenery open space in Sentul City. So in order to avoid invasive species of the exotic one, and all the plant from the grasses, bush, shrub, until the trees, we promote as the local species or indigenous species. So for instance, we promote local species for water saving plant. In local name, we call it Gayam or Inocarpus fagier, aren, Aren is the symbol of Bogor district plant. This is Arenga pinnata. Also can conserve and protect the water. Beringin is Ficus benyamina. Sentul is name of plant, or we recognize as kecapi. So the academic name is Sandoricum kucape. And right here, about the planning recommendation in Sentul City, urban park development. So this is the integrating green infrastructure and water storage infrastructure into the urban park. This is very, very important to consider. The second one, urban forest development, to maintaining the ecological condition of Sentul City is very important to ensure the overall watershed conservation. Number three, new city. Situ is a small lake, small man-made lake. It could be a good alternative for Sentul City to store rainwater and reduce dependency from PDAM water. And the last is implementation of rain garden in feed drains and parking lot. So upgrade the function of the existing feed drain. So feed drain we recognize in the left side or in the right side of the boulevard in any Sentul City road. And a rain garden in public spaces and parking spaces should be developed in the future. And as a part last this lecture, or a part of this lecture closing, I want to tell the lesson learned from the local wisdom of spatial planning from Javanese culture, Balinese culture, and South Sulawesi culture. So this slide about the sustainability concept of alun-alun. This is local name as a city square as model of urban design in the future. So open space in the center of the cosmic city in Majapahit Kingdom, more or less in 13th century, have been discovered in the Dutch colonial era, which come to be known as the square. On in local name, we call it alun-alun. And new square have sprung up in various royal cities, such as in Yogyakarta, Solo, as well as in my hometown in Cirebon, and other cities in Java Island. And the concept of alun-alun as a square is very interesting, of spatial planning and the direction of the wind. For instance, in every city, we can identify the southern part of alun-alun is always attached to the center of government. To the west lies the mosque, place of worship, and the north is the center of life for settlement, school, to prison, while the east as the economic center. And in any city, sometimes we call it pecinan if predominantly by Chinese ethnic, or kauman if predominance by community from the Middle East. And this concept of alun-alun is referred to as the concept of sustainability in the expansion of the city center, in the development of new city center in the future. And the second one, the philosophy of Trihita Karana. So this is the local knowledge and local wisdom in Bali Island. Starting from the human body structure, I mean, building, architecture, house, village, until city and the island, everything divided become three. Head, or we call it utama, or parahiangan, and the second one, body, or madya, pawongan, and the last, the bottom is leg, or nista, or in the local name, palemahan. So this joining is very clear. for spatial planning in order to reach a sustainable landscape. And this Trihita Karana also implemented in Subak system. I think everyone knows the Subak is water resources management in Bali, and based on the philosophy of Trihita Karana. I think this is to be considered for the development of the future city. And the last slide, in Toraja Utara or North Toraja in South Celebes, South Sulawesi, we can consider those social cultural factor. We can see the land use and spatial management are influenced by community activities, traditional ceremonies.
You have 3 minutes left. Yep.
This is the last slide, Professor.
Thank you.
And orientation nature as seen in the element forming the landscape. And the main component in this village or in the city of the Toraja Utara, so this is like a traditional zone inside of the city. We can see a village and the local name, we call it Tondok, a building, a Banua, Tongkonan, and Alang. Alang is like agriculture storage for rice. And burial site, we call it Liang. Place of ceremonies, Rante. Traditional land, we call it Kombong. And grazing. So this is for a cattle. Panglabaran. And well, we call it Bubun. So spatial land use planning is very typical from the higher place, from the upper part to the downstream or the lowest area. So, for instance, Panglili as a forest located in the should be in the upper part, and the what we say like a cultivated landscape. So the upper part for protected landscape, and cultivated landscape should be in the downstream. So the profile of the city or traditional city, or we call it village, can be seen through this slide. It's very, very interesting and to be considered for the city to implement the local wisdom and local knowledge. Because in Indonesia, we have many ethnic. So we hope every city can consider from their own local knowledge and local wisdom. So the direction, as in Bali, this is also very important, also in Java philosophy. For instance, the north part is God, and the south is a bad thing, and the east is life and happiness, and west is death and distress. So everybody believe about this. Okay, that's all.
Wow, okay.
Professor Damayanti.
Thank you so much, Professor Hadi. Very, very interesting and eye-opener. So we have listened to Professor Hadi, who started his presentation with the concept of what an eco-city is. And then he went on into providing example, Sentul City as an example. And then lastly, he included local knowledge and urban design from various culture in Indonesia. So it's really amazing how you can integrate the local wisdom and also for the future. So this is, I think, what is so special about Indonesia. So thank you so much, Professor Hadi.
You are welcome.
Yes. Okay. So now we move on to our next speaker, Professor Diego, and his title is Urban Design for Inclusion. So, Professor Diego, 25 minutes is yours.
Thank you very much, Professor Damayanti. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. Okay.
Yes, we can see it.
Great. Well, first of all, Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm delighted to be here. I think it's a great webinar series. Thank you very much, Selvi and Professor Hadi. It's great to be working with you. Professor Hadi and I worked together for about 3 years in a joint project around these kinds of themes. So it's great to be back sharing some thoughts with you. So Professor Hadi gave us a rich, I think, very thoughtful account of how cities can be sustainable through the integration of landscape and ecosystem services. So I'm now going to speak to what I think is an equally important dimension of cities and communities. And as cities become home to increasingly larger populations, we don't only need to make them sustainable and resilient, but we need to make them fair, equitable, and inclusive. So we saw the Sustainable Development Goals in Hadi's presentation, but the goals place the topic of inclusion front and center. And in fact, 5 of the 17 goals use the word inclusive in their high-level definition. And in fact, all the SDGs scatter the word inclusive profusely in all of their targets. So despite wide recognition and commitment worldwide that building inclusive cities should remain it remains actually an enormous challenge. So urbanization has been one of the most significant driving forces of global development and can create opportunities for a better life. As the world increasingly urbanizes, however, there is a rise in inequality and exclusion within cities. So the United Nations and other international human rights groups have a mission to address these challenges. At the center of inclusion is the access to adequate housing and services, which is seen as a fundamental human right. This is reinforced by Sustainable Development Goal 11, which Professor Hadi also mentioned in his presentation, sustainable cities and communities. And this SDG 11 has a first target, which states that by 2030, we should ensure access for all, adequate, safe, and affordable housing and basic services and upgrading of slums. However, significant challenges and mounting pressures will make this target increasingly difficult to achieve. So by 2030, urban populations will rise to 5.1 billion, and 95% of this growth will take place in the developing world. Of these populations, almost 1 billion people live in slums today. By 2030, this number will double to 2 billion. By 2050, 1 out of every 3 people is projected will live in slums. So inequality, I should say, is not only a developing world problem, it affects the entire globe, the entire world, and is also a significant problem in what we call the global north. So in the global north, a stark polarization of wealth and the lack of affordable frameworks for the urban poor result in socio-spatial inequalities, which are seeing diminishing levels of opportunity and housing affordability in particular. Widely accepted tenets call for the need to create more inclusive cities to ensure that tomorrow's cities globally are able to provide opportunities and better living conditions for all. But how do we do this? How can we contribute to making more inclusive cities? In the first instance, we have to understand that the concept of inclusivity and inclusive cities involves a complex interrelated web of spatial, social, economic, and environmental factors. Hadi discussed this in a way, all of these factors are interrelated. We see this, in fact, at the moment with COVID. It's very interesting that increasing problems in environmental degradation will likely result in more frequent pandemics, which in turn have a huge impact in inclusion and equity in cities. So in the first instance, social inclusion calls for an inclusive city, which needs to guarantee equal rights and participation for all, including the most marginalized. And recently, we've seen the lack of opportunities for the urban poor and greater demand for voice from the socially excluded have exacerbated incidents of social upheaval in cities and protests around the world, just recently around Black Lives Matter, for example. Economic inclusion, creating jobs and giving urban residents the opportunity to enjoy the benefits of economic growth is a critical component of overall inclusion. And last, but for me, most importantly in some ways, spatial inclusion requires providing affordable necessities such as housing, water, and sanitation. Lack of access to essential infrastructure and services is a daily struggle for many disadvantaged households. So as an urban researcher and practitioner trying to effect change in making more inclusive cities, primarily in the spatial domain, I've been pursuing with several teams the mission for about 2 decades now, through built projects and through work that contributes to policy. We have come to understand that achieving inclusion in cities across the spatial, social, and economic dimensions is a multidimensional challenge that can only be addressed by a coalition of partners working across sectors and disciplines. This is, of course, one of the principal tenets of the SDG goals, and we call this mode of activity research. We use our place in academia to develop new knowledge and innovation that can go on to be tested on the ground through implementation, working closely with partners from governments, communities, and the development sector. So we've done this through the lens of spatial inclusion, and I would like to now go on to share some of the research and projects which have been addressing themes of inclusion in cities. A little bit closer home here in Australia, where some of the challenges we face in the next 35 years, Australia's cities will double in size. And Melbourne, where we are, will go from 4.5 million to 9 million residents by 2055. Interestingly, Melbourne is often cited as a bastion of livability, having received first or second place as the world's most livable city about 10 years running. However, housing affordability in this city continues to plummet, with Melbourne ranking 6th in the list of most unaffordable cities in the developed world, behind London and New York. This high level of livability serves some segments of the population, yet an increasing number of cities under housing stress, and our governments are unable to meet affordable housing demands. So in order to affect large-scale change in the context of policy and delivery, we engage with frameworks at scale and models that deliver the most affordable outcomes. So housing provides about 40% of the most affordable housing in the market. And we start our contribution, this is where we were designing a house in collaboration with the Victorian State Government, a prototype for mass housing to be produced at large scale as a model for affordability. This is achieved not only in economical building systems and mass production, but also allowing for multiple forms of occupation where part of the dwelling can be rented or subdivided and sold. And here we see different kinds of ways of occupying the house that allows for these different affordability options. The prototype was built a few years back and went into production with the volume builder in Australia. So a similar strategy is applied to a larger scale multi-residential demonstration project, which was where we partnered with government again, state government on affordable and sustainable housing for increasing urban density. However, trying to retain, of course, high levels of amenity and access. And once again, of models, flexible apartments, adaptable townhouses that would provide viable alternatives for an increasingly diverse population. Once again, these models were trying to allow for different forms of access and occupation. Here for one large extended family, for example, or business from home or home office, or a subdividable unit that could be once again rented or sold. So these housing demonstration projects offer integrated economic, social, and environmental benefits from which we extract principles to inform policy in the development sector toward more inclusive. So these housing models are then explored again in partnership with government and a large not-for-profit housing association here in Victoria at the scale of the precinct. This is a very important scale in urban design because it allows us to integrate in significant ways the different scales of development, from the scale of the dwelling through to larger systemic scales. So this is exploring new models of procurement for increasing livability, affordability, and sustainability at neighborhood level. With interdisciplinary partners, so looking at a study on decentralized services of energy, water, and waste, and the themes of water have particularly decentralized water systems and infrastructure have to inform lots of the work that I'm doing at the moment. And importantly, in the city, and increased connectivity, so very important to the ecology of our cities that Bakhadi was speaking of. So we look at this also in terms of new financing models and how there can be cross-subsidy for public-private partnerships between private sector and public sector partners. So importantly, this work has been interdisciplinary, collaborating with environmental planners, economists, and working closely with government and the development sector to deliver models that are highly innovative while remaining relevant and achievable. Okay, so now we turn to the Global South. And the process of transdisciplinarity and working across sectors is particularly important when operating in the developing world, the Global South, particularly in an area that I'm very passionate about, settlements or slums. Complex web of issues that combined make this such a wicked, difficult problem. So as we said before, the almost 1 billion people that live in slums today will double by 2030 to 2 billion. And this dramatic urban growth will have a profound impact on cities and their ability to be equitable and inclusive. Slum populations are enormous and growing, and this challenge is fundamentally a problem of inclusion. The urban poor, and particularly vulnerable slum communities, do not have access to the housing and urban services that they so much deserve. We have been pursuing a range of projects within the context of informal settlements and the equitable provision of services. So one such project is titled RISE, which stands for Revitalizing Informal Settlements and Their Environments. This is a large multi-sectoral research program involving 6 countries, 18 institutions, and aims to deliver a water-sensitive revitalization of urban informal settlements in Fiji and Indonesia. So in these contexts, over 580,000 children die of gastrointestinal diseases each year due to highly contaminated environments. And our vision is to address this by improving human, environmental, and ecological health in informal urban settlements across the developing world through a new approach to integrated water management. The water-sensitive revitalization of slums is looking at achieving multiple benefits by providing flood protection, improving public health through sanitation, improving environmental quality, diversifying water supply through stormwater, rainwater harvesting and wastewater recycling, and finally, providing urban agriculture with alternative water supply. So we are working across 24 communities in the city of Makassar in South Sulawesi and 12 communities in Suva, Fiji, with a very large project population of about 7,000 people and 1,200 households. So we've developed strategies for the holistic integration of water services and access at whole of community level using centralized nature-based infrastructure or green infrastructure, as Professor Hadi mentioned in the earlier talk, to actually clean, filter black water coming from toilets and gray water using natural biochemical processes. Here we see the demonstration project that we completed about 5 months ago in Makassar, with the significant levels of flooding, as you see on the image on the left, and on the then right, the revitalized community with a new access road and the wastewater treatment wetlands on the edge of this road. And this is these are the decentralized systems for cleaning wastewater. The project is delivered through high level of inclusive processes, through gender-sensitive community participation and co-design, making sure that we listen to all, not just the loudest voices, including women and children. So to arrive at a revitalization plan, and we've done this for six communities in Indonesia, and we're doing that at the moment for Fiji, revitalization plans, which include implementation plans with responsibilities for the different stakeholders, the RISE project, and the community. A similar project in Indonesia, in this case in the island of Java, and looking at working with the Citarum River. As the longest river in West Java, the river basin is home to 25 million people who rely on water for daily use. However, as some of you may know, it is also one of the world's most polluted rivers, and each day 20,000 tons of waste and 340,000 tons of wastewater are disposed directly into the river. At the end of 2018, we were invited by the governor, Ridwan Kamil, to join efforts to assist with research and development efforts toward improving the river and communities. So over the last 14 months, we've established the Citarum Action Research Program, which is a place-based mission to revive in its vulnerable communities, again, in partnership with the West Java government and 4 universities, UI, IPB, UNPAD, and UPI. And once again, we are taking the same model as RISE of delivering infrastructure on the ground, contributing to the lives of those on the ground through a demonstration project aiming to develop and build an intervention at village scale of waste, community infrastructure, and a rigorous program of research in ecological and human health, well-being, and community resilience to climate change. So the reason we arrived at the scale of the demonstration project at the scale of the village is the government's significant interest in being able to upscale this approach to other villages in the Citarum. So I hope that I've been able to make some sort of a case, a compelling case, that in order to engage effectively in making more inclusive cities, we must engage with social, economic, environmental, and political contexts through action that is both bottom up as well as top down. And to effect policy change, work at scale, and achieve impact, our research must be transdisciplinary and must work closely with community, with industry, and with government. This type of integrated thinking and action is what I believe is required for transformational change in delivering more inclusive cities globally. Thank you. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih, Bapak Diego, Professor Diego. Very interesting to hear your presentation, and it's such a complex project that you are working on. And you're doing both at the global north and also at the global south. So you really, you really love complexity, it seems. Okay, so participants, we now have about 30 minutes or 34 minutes because we will end at 3. And we are now into the question answer sessions. And there are 2 ways to do this. The first is if you would like to ask yourself in person, you may raise your hand, and I think the host will be able to see you, which one is raising their hand, and then the host will unmute you, and then you can ask directly. Now, the second way is writing down at the Q&A, and then I will read it for you to the presenter. So when you write down for the Q&A, please don't forget to identify yourself, your name, who you are, and then to whom is the question being directed. Okay, so open question. Are there any raise of hand? I don't know if the host can see. If there's not, I will try to, there's a question in the Q&A, so let me first read this. This is a question for Professor Hadi. It doesn't have a name, so I'm sorry, Pak Hadi, I cannot tell you the name of the person. But this is the question. I want to ask you about the plan of our country to move the capital city from Jakarta to Kalimantan. Do you think the current plan is also considering sustainability issue? So, Pak Hadi, that's the first question directed to you.
Okay, thank you, Bu Dami, and thank you, the participant that has asked about the new capital city. Yeah, this is the good question. If consider to Bappenas, so I know in 2019, last year, there was pre-master plan for new city, and the city strategy was developed on the sustainable development goal and involve a various group of government organization and cross topic expert. So by this, what we say, as far as I know, I think the urban planner, city designer has collaboration in transdisciplinary aspect. And then, of course, they consider the sustainability, not only for economical aspect, but also ecologically and socio-culturally. And for your information, I think last year, there is competition of the design of new capital city in Kalimantan, move Jakarta to Kalimantan. And from the finalists, I saw very good design, very good planning of the city. And then they have some good collaboration in any aspect to promote sustainable city. And just yesterday, somebody from Bappenas also asked me to provide the idea as a forest city. So in the new capital city, because the existing condition, many forests there, and how to protect, how to conserve the biodiversity, how to protect the water, the air, and
Biodiversity.
biodiversity in the conservation. So next week, I invited to Bapenas to make some proposal in the FGD. Yeah,
Interesting.
this.
Okay. Wow, that's very exciting. So hopefully, with your involvement in the program, the new capital will be really an eco city, ya, Pak, ya?
Hopefully, yeah.
Okay. Is there any raised hand? Is there someone who would like to ask directly to either Pak Diego or Pak Hadi? You may do so. Maybe the host can unmute you. Do I hear voices? No. Okay. Well, if not, I would like to ask a question actually to Professor Diego. It's very interesting that you are using a transdisciplinary approach in the work that you are doing. And in that diagram, you have this discovery research, and then what's the other one? I forgot.
Yeah, so we say
What's the
discovery,
difference?
research, implementation, research, and development practice. Yeah.
Okay. So are you always using all those triple circle in all the work that you are doing? The first question. The second one, how transdisciplinary are you? Do you actually always involve the community in your research, in your work, and do you see this as a hindrance, or do you actually see that it's actually innovating to involve the community?
Yeah.
What was your experience?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Ibu Damayanti. I mean, I think first of all, I suppose this Venn diagram of the transdisciplinary research model is important. Something that became very clear for me was that I come from a background of practice. So I was originally a practitioner, and then I became an academic. And I was very frustrated by seeing all the incredible knowledge that was being produced in academia that was really finding it hard to make its way into practice and into implementation. So I became really focused and obsessed with trying to make those connections, what we call the arc from discovery to implementation. And in fact, with the state of things, what I would call, in fact, the climate emergency, there are a lot of very significant problems that require fast action. So being able to speed up that process from new discoveries, new knowledge through to implementation on the ground is what I'm trying to do. And of course, I can't do that on my own. We need partners, and we need lots of them. So of course, the more partners you have, the more difficult projects get. And different groups have different requirements and have different views. So it becomes, I think, incredibly complex when you involve communities that may have certain aspirations, and then governments that will likely want to take things in certain directions. So, however, I see our role as being pivotal in being able to manage and somehow coordinate those different requirements to get the best outcomes. So I suppose that's something that has interested me for a long time. And while particularly involving communities in Indonesia, we've been working with as I was saying in the RISE project, with about 7,000 people, so a very large number of communities, well, across Indonesia and Fiji. The work is very much richer as a result. And that is because as Pak Hadi was saying, there is enormous local wisdom. They know their environment. They know what things are going to work and what things are not going to work. So our role is really to help them articulate and translate those strategies into built outcomes. But from my perspective, we wouldn't be able to work without them.
Okay. Okay, so you're an expert in transdisciplinarity. That's a fairly new subject in Indonesia. And the center that I'm heading, the Center for Transdisciplinary and Systematic Science, we would love to have you as part of our research network. I mean, for the future.
Would be delighted to participate. I think it's the way of the future.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Now, there are other questions for Pak Diego and also Pak Hadi. So let me ask again to Pak Diego first, and then I will go to Pak Hadi after this one is answered by Professor Diego. Okay, it doesn't have a name again, or it does, it just says BSU. But the question is this, Professor Diego, I would like to know the difficulties in getting a research, oops, where is it gone? At community, and how to find the main problem needed to be solved. There you go. The difficulties in getting a research at the with the community, maybe that's what it's meant. And how to find the main problem need to be solved. Maybe the question is more related also on the how do you define the problem?
Well,
and how is it that you involve community as part of your research?
Yeah, I mean, I think at a high level the problems are very evident. I mean, the lack of sanitation. I mean, there are different problems, of course, in different places, but in the work that we're doing in Indonesia, the lack of sanitation, the lack of services, the issues with solid waste are so huge. That is the meta problem. How you solve the problem and the sub problems, because there are many sub problems, then is when you need to involve the community. So that can take many shapes in the, and Fakhadi very well, the problem of solid waste, for example, is not just a technical problem, is not just a social problem. It involves a whole range of different economic factors, social factors, environmental, that's right, ecological factors. So in that sense, then one must arrive at a solution which is again sort of integrated by inclusion of partners and deep engagement with partners, with communities, but not just communities, also with government, because government, is really key in their role in addressing some of these problems at scale. So we have an example where you may develop a very good demonstration project at small scale with communities, but how do you then upscale that? The only way you can upscale is by involving government. So it needs to have both stakeholders.
But when you determine the main problem, is it from your eyes that this is important, or is it also a participatory process to actually come to what is the main problem?
I mean, I'm an outsider, so I don't live the problems. Okay. So they have to come from the community.
Okay.
I'm merely an interpreter. I'm trying to see them with, maybe I see them with fresh eyes, so that sometimes helps. But they have to work with our teams. We have to ascertain what the problems are and how they play out in each community. So I think that's really really important. And this is what, in urban design terms or in architecture terms is really the future again, is what we call co-design. So it's not the traditional sense of the designer as the master director at all. It's coming together and coming to a solution together through a deep engagement and participation.
Great,
And that's
thank you.
quite a change in.
Thank you so much. Pak Hadi, there's another question for you from Pak Rizal. What is the best plans for biofiltration or bioremediation in the paddy rice ecosystem? Do you need a bioremediation in paddy rice ecosystem?
Yeah.
Okay, Pak Hadi. Maybe.
Yeah, actually, I want to know what is the problem in paddy field.
Exactly.
Because we talk bioremediation is a branch of biotechnology that employs the use of living organism, yeah, like microbe or bacteria, fungi, to remove all the contaminant. As far as I know, yeah, pollutant or contaminant in the paddy field, like from fertilizer, perhaps, yeah, or from pesticide, is methane gas. But yeah. My question is, what is the problem? And then we have to take bioremediation in paddy field. If more methane gas, yeah, methane gas itself can be used for biogas, but how much the pollutant in the paddy field? Yeah, so I don't know what need bioremediation in paddy field, but in the like in the what we say pasca pertambangan, what is in English, post mining,
Post-mining.
yeah, post mining landscape. This is very important because there is a sludge and heavy metal, yeah, in the soil, in the water, and then we can use a bioremediation method. And also, I have experience in Kalimantan, in Tanjung Santen, to take a bioremediation project for the big post mining landscape. Soil, oil factory. Yeah.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you, Pak Hadi. Yeah, so
Yeah.
the
Sorry,
answer
Ibu
is...
Nami, I could not answer.
Yeah, but I think that the answer is very clear because we understand that the paddy rice field itself is already a very sustainable ecosystem, and that has been researched by many people, that the traditional knowledge of especially the Japanese, how they manage the rice ecosystem itself is already sustainable. So the question on bioremediation, if the rice ecosystem is not affected by any oil spill or whatever, then you don't really need bioremediation for that. Okay, next question to Professor Diego from Risdayatri Aulia. She is from the Graduate School of IPB University, from the Landscape Architecture study program. Her question is, I would like to ask Professor Diego about the RISE project. Why Makassar City is chosen for this project? Is there any particular reason for that?
Yep. So the RISE project, in a similar way to the Citarum project, there's two components. One is an infrastructure component, and another one is a research component. And again, transdisciplinary research ecology that we speak of, we need to have both happening at the same time. One of the problems is that research is funded by certain groups that don't fund infrastructure, and infrastructure is funded by certain groups that don't fund research. So in the RISE project, the infrastructure in Indonesia is funded by the Asian Development Bank. The Asian Development Bank had certain priority cities, and they were the ones that nominated Makassar as a priority for the RISE project because it had significant issues that they were very interested in looking at specifically. So that came as a result of being funded by the Asian Development.
Okay.
The choice, yeah.
Yeah.
But we're very glad they
very
chose
clear
Makassar.
answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
You love that city, yeah? Beautiful
I do,
city.
yeah. Especially the spicy food. Yeah.
The fish.
Delicious, yes.
Okay, so the next question is also for Professor Diego. This is a very good question by Diego from Shalahuddin Al Ayubi. What is the hardest part of your inclusive series project?
Yeah, that is a good question. It's also a very hard question. I think my sense is that, as I was saying before, inclusiveness requires a whole range of different, it's multifactorial and requires coordination across a range of different parameters. And a high number of partners in effective partnerships, and that just takes a long time, and it's a complex management task to align groups and to get a big machinery moving in the same direction. There are different interest groups. There are different people have different interests, and it's only natural. So being able to come up different constraints, coming up with an optimized outcome that is satisfies the different requirements of partners and stakeholders for being inclusive is very challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Very challenging.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. Okay, the next question here I think is for Pak Hadi. It's about menanam pohon yang besar. So based putting or planting trees for a new city, and you're taking it from another place to this place. Is this actually good for the environment, or is this just a business landscape? If you don't consider the actual local ecology or whatever. Yeah, I think you know the questions. From Andi Andayani.
Yeah. Thank you, Handayani. It's a good question. Perhaps recently many landscape industry explore the big trees from in situ area and what we say provide for urban greenery. Actually, I have not suggest this business, even though trees or plant is renewable. Yeah. So I suggest if there is some potential species and very good to plant in the urban landscape. So the landscape industry, especially nurserymen, nursery industry has to make a seedling or cutting or grafting, what we say, oculation, and so on. It's not need time. So I think can be provided by this method, not directly explore from in situ area to move the big trees to the city. Because I know, Bu Dami, some industry exploit the from margin forest or forest border and took the big tree and moved to the city. This is a renewable resources. We can make from the nursery. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Pak Hadi. Okay, the next question is from Patricia. Her last name is difficult. Patricia Ntagoma. Yeah. She did not direct it to anyone, but I would like to offer to either one of you to answer it. And the question is, how do you approach governments, brackets here, African government, to interest them on the importance of sustainable urban planning when they have other priorities? Bracket, I feel like they underestimate the importance of sustainable development. So how could I encourage it? So would anyone like to answer that? Diego, probably? How do you interest the government?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, for the question. I mean, I suppose in the first instance, I mean, I've never worked in Africa, but I have many colleagues that have, and I guess maybe the tension sometimes comes from perceived lack of, well, in a resource constrained environment, the perceived additional energies and cost or resources that need to go into rethinking things to make them sustainable, or new systems that are required, systems change, et cetera, et cetera. And that's fair enough. I mean, it is very hard when governments are heavily under resourced to really change things and really transform, say, urban planning frameworks and systems and so on. So, I mean, I think my sense of that is that the best way as a practitioner to address some of those questions is to find a problem that they need solved. How can we help with solving a problem that they need solved and don't have the resources or the know-how to solve that problem? Which sometimes has meant for us, for example, that we don't necessarily get our way. We have to give a lot of space to the needs that governments have. So it's a give and take. And once you build trust and you build relationships, and people know that you have something to offer, then you can get somewhere. But in the first instance, I think that's a good way in to build trust in relationships.
Right. That's a very good answer. Trying to solve the problems that they're facing first and building the trust. Great. Okay. There's this one question that I will ask to both of you, and I think that will be sort of like a wrap up for you also. So it's the same question, but since I think it's a good one, so I would like for both of you to answer that. Okay. It's from Pak Eka. Pak Eka Putra, to all panelists. Professor Hadi and Professor Diego, do you think to make a sustainable city, the behavior of the citizen in that city needs to change in a fundamental way? If yes, what is that fundamental change that is required? So one question for both of you and also as a wrap up for this session. So Pak Hadi, maybe you want to go first?
Yeah, Bu Dami. I think, because SDGs itself, the what we say, the United Nations policy should be followed by every country and of course supported in every city. For instance, in the Goal 11, regarding the city sustainable. So of course, the community should be change the mindset, and the basically is a change the habit, change the culture, how to support the program of the government. Actually, not only government, because we know there are some NGOs concern and support the sustainable system. So the culture should be changed. Everybody has a same perception. So, and then the community can be developed. And from the government side, of course, we need regulation, but not only regulation. So we need law. So if somebody doesn't follow regulation, so what is the disincentive? And if somebody follow the regulation, also we need the incentive, the habit or the culture in our country so familiar. So for the future, government, community, and academy such as Ibu Dami and myself, and like business. And the last is media, and then we call it the pentahelic collaboration together to take the sustainable of city, and we can say sustainable city or eco city. Thank you, Bu Dami.
Thank you, Pak Hadi. Professor Diego.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that's a very good question. So it's also a very difficult question. I mean, I think I think that yes, of course, communities are front and center in terms of delivering sustainable cities, inclusive cities, and however, it's sometimes very difficult for communities to be acting in a way that is going to be in sort of contributing to the whole system, I suppose. We see it now with COVID, for example. It's a very clear, it's a very stark representation of that concept, where we know that the best thing for everyone is to stay home and stay isolated. Because of the inequalities of cities, there are many people that cannot afford to stay home. They have to go out and they have to work. So they do so in ways as safe as they can, but it also means that it is likely not going to only harm them, it is going to harm others. So for me, that's a very good example of how frameworks of inequality make it very difficult for communities to participate in ways that will promote sustainability and equity. It has to come from some way also, of course, from the top. There have to be systems of support, and we don't have those systems yet. I mean, I think what's very interesting is how, in my view, the answer lies a lot in revisiting what Baghadi was talking about in his lecture about traditional systems of living in cities, and indigenous peoples had a very good balance between the different environmental, social, spiritual parameters of their lives, and in a sense, for communities to be able to change, I think it seems to me they need to find, maybe as Bakari was saying, incentives to change, and being able to find new frameworks. Maybe these indigenous ways are, from my perspective, are the way of the future. But
Wonderful.
But it is a hard thing.
Oh God. Okay. Wow. Beautiful. So, ladies and gentlemen, to the last 2 minutes of our session for today. So we have listened. We have been learning together this afternoon about sustainable cities. We have heard from Pak Hadi and also Pak Diego about the principles, the concept of sustainable cities, and then the practices, the research that are using transdisciplinary approach on how to build a sustainable city, and inclusion, especially inclusion in terms of social economy and also ecology. And it's very interesting that today we have a very complete discussion here, because Pak Diego has introduced us with all the challenges of the developing world in Citarum and the Rice Project, etc. And then Pak Hadi completed that with the past. So lastly, Pak Diego mentioned about how is it that we can learn from the past to adapt for the future. That's beautiful. So how is it that we can include the wisdom of our ancestors and to gain new knowledge for developing sustainable cities in the future? So I think this is the correct way and for finding a sustainability, because we are not forgetting also our roots in our culture. And perhaps, who knows, with this model that is being developed by and also by Diego, the Indonesia will become a model for future cities, development city in other parts of the world, because learning from the past is always good because we can learn for adapting for the future. So, ladies and gentlemen, participants, Pak Hadi, Pak Diego, it's been a wonderful, wonderful session. We are learning so much from you, and hopefully we can meet again in the future.
Sure.
And
Thank you.
working collaboration with Monash. And also thank you for the host and for Panitia, for the organizers for this event, especially for IPB Monash collaboration. So with that, we are closing our session. And thank you once again, and see you again in the future. Selamat
Thank you.
siang.
Thank you very much.
Professor Diego. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
you,
Professor
everybody.
Hadi. Nice to see you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.